Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. How do you carry unimaginable grief and still find the strength to teach, to lead, and to believe? This week, I sit down with Rabbi Yirmi Stavitsky, a man who, over the course of a lifetime in education and community leadership, has lived with a level of loss I think few of us can imagine. As the former principal of Himmelfarb High School, the place where actually I went to high school, and a continued teacher there, Yirmi has seen 27 of his students fall in defense of Israel. Men who he taught, guided, and knew personally. Since October 7th, that number has grown even more devastating. 10 of his students have been killed in the latest war. And grief in Yirmi's case has struck even closer to home. His own son-in-law, Inon Fleischman, married to his daughter Noah, was killed in Israel's fight for survival. In our conversation set against the backdrop of Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut, we talk about what it means to live in this country, to live with so much pain, but yet to choose to believe in the future, to believe in hope. We talk about mourning without becoming trapped in despair, and honoring the fallen, not just with tears, but with building, with teaching, and with hope. Yirmi shares with me how a nation can carry on despite such a heavy collective grief, and how we can wake up each day, carry the names, the memories, the unfinished dreams of those who are no longer here, but still find strength to build, to create, and to carry the nation forward, to hope for a better Israel and for a better future for the Jewish people. Stay with us. Rabbi Yirmi Stavitsky, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So I think we'll jump straight into it. We're talking as Yom HaZikaron is starting here in Israel, and obviously very difficult days. The country's still at war. Soldiers still falling. Just a few days ago, 2 soldiers fell in Gaza, laid to rest. More stories of heroism, of courage, but also of pain and grief that the country still suffers from. And at the same time, we have Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Independence Day, which is coming right after, as it always does every year. And I want to talk to you and get your insight into how are people meant to even celebrate that. But before we go there, as a longtime educator at one of the flagship high schools here in Jerusalem, I can say I'm a graduate of Himmelfarb. You were the principal for a long time. Now you just took a step back from being principal, but you're still a mechanech, a homeroom teacher, or the main educator of the 12th grade. But you have lost 10 students over the last 18 months. One of the more recent funerals of one of the soldiers that fell, I heard that one of the rabbis at Himmelfarb said, there's a minyan here already at Har Herzl, at the cemetery. So I really just want to start with understanding, how does a school cope? How do you cope, knowing each and every one of these students, I'm sure?
Yes, we lost since the 7th of October, and there who threw back the grenades in the Nova. And Hirsch was kidnapped from there. They were good friends, and he was murdered in the tunnels. And Ariel, who 2 days before he was killed, sent me a WhatsApp asking if I can marry him. So I officiate. And he was supposed to get married to Noah. And Ben Zussman, his father was in the first class I taught in Himmelfarb, and Shachar Friedman, who was a paratrooper, and Vir Barazani, who was foot in Be'eri, but was later killed in Gaza, and 2 boys from the Ethiopian community, Oriya and Malcolm. Malcolm was born in Ethiopia. He came here when he was 2 years old. He sort of mediated Israeli culture to his parents. And Rav Avi Goldberg, who was a student of mine, he came back. Actually, he had a stint in Memphis as rabbi in the community there in the school with his wife Rachel, and then he came back and he became a teacher and the Rav of Himmelfarb, and Yuval Sholem, who was killed not long ago in Gaza. But this has been part of me for many years. My first student, a lovely young man, was killed in Lebanon, Roi, and he was a medic in Golani. He actually wanted to be a doctor, and just from the classes I taught, and Yedidia, who was also a medic, and Eli Raz, and then many others when I was principal. So that's part, I think, of being a principal in a national religious school in Jerusalem. We don't push the kids to serve. We don't tell them they have to serve. In fact, we on times recommend kids who it's not appropriate to, definitely not to be combat. Sometimes we tell the students on an individual basis that we think it's better if they do national service. But there's some ethos in the school. The kids want to serve.
The past former chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, is a graduate of Himmelfarb as well.
Right. And he would come and talk to the boys, and he'd come to talk to the boys about the importance of what he does, so I think between 1% and 2% of all IDF combat infantry officers are graduates of Himmelfarb. So the numbers, and we're not a huge school, so the numbers are very big. And sometimes I ask myself, what right do we have to educate in that manner? And I give myself a couple of answers. I think the first answer is that we, the staff, the teachers, we served when it was our time. We're not asking them to do something that we didn't do. I also, they have families and their parents have what to say. Actually, it's interesting. I've asked Hirsch's parents. I've asked some other people who made Aliyah whose children were wounded if they would have changed the choice of moving here, knowing what the consequences are, and they say no. We believe in what we do, and we're happy we live here, even though they paid a very big price. There is a law in the state of Israel. Young men who are 18 years old are supposed to serve by law. This is not, we didn't make it up at Himmelfarb. But the real answer is that if we want a Jewish state, and in my opinion, the Jewish state is a form of redemption, not in the mystical sense, but it is such a meaningful event in Jewish history that if we want a Jewish state, and it doesn't matter if your politics are right or left, there are a lot of people out there who don't want us to be here. It's a very tough, disturbing neighborhood. And if we don't have people who are willing to sacrifice, we will not be here. There will be no state of Israel. And in that sense, these are very difficult days for me because it's Memorial Day on Wednesday, and then Yom Ha'atzmaut on Thursday, Independence Day. So the sorrow is tremendous, and the sorrow of the dead, the sorrow of what these young men could have been, the sorrow of the families. You go to these memorials year after year for 27 years, and the parents age, and and the pain is still there. And on the other hand, we're very proud that we're part of the Jewish people, and we understand, or our students understand, that they play a significant role in the rebirth of the Jewish nation. That's a big thing. It's something to be proud about. And you can be sad and proud at the same time.
But I can assume that it can't be simple to stand in that classroom, to teach those students, to lecture them, to instill within them those values of Zionism, self-sacrifice or commitment, before even sacrifice, commitment to the Jewish state, to giving selflessly, as so many, I mean, the stories of Aner, for an example, right? What amazing, it's just crazy. It's inhumane almost, to grenade after grenade, 7 grenades, to take each one, throw them out. The 8th, unfortunately, exploded and killed him. I mean, where these heroes come from. Ben Zussman, who wrote in that letter that he left behind, I want to be that guardian of Jerusalem. And I thank God, I thank you, to his parents, that I was able to do that I fell in battle, right? He writes this letter before. I mean, who makes these kids? And then you say, okay, Himmelfarb is one of the contributors, at least, to making these kids. So you know that you're teaching this crop of kids who, it could be half a year from now, we're still going to be in war. And some of these kids might be the ones whose faces appear on the front page of the newspaper.
Let's put it in historical perspective. In 1944, when they started to murder the Jews in Hungary, when Auschwitz was really working at full production, in 2 days, they killed between 25 and 35,000 Jews. The number of Jews who were killed here since the time of the Shomer in 1880, we always have that number on the newspaper on Memorial Day. We're talking about between 25 and 26,000 people who were killed in the last 100 years here. So that's those are the proportions that the fate of the Jewish people has changed in a way nobody could have dreamed. And in the summer, we're going on a Poland trip. And I also try to explain to the students what happened on the 7th of October was not a Holocaust. It was a pogrom. It was a pogrom, and it could have been 100 times better if so many young people didn't just take arms and fight. We just had a class trip. We just got special access to go into Kibbutz Be'eri because one of our graduates is volunteering there, and Chilik Troper, the member of Knesset, who's close to the school, came with us, and actually we were in Kibbutz Be'eri, and in a way, we saw what would happen if we don't have people who are willing to put their lives on the line. And I grew up in the United States. The army should not be, for the poor and the underprivileged. If the strong members of society don't participate, the army won't sustain itself. And that's, I think, one of the reasons so many young Israelis, religious, secular, like the army, is that all of a sudden all those barriers come down.
It's a great melting pot.
It's a great melting pot. And it's funny. I talk to so many kids who are in combat now, who have been in combat, and they say we get along so well in the army. Why can't politics work that way? But maybe that's a different issue.
I'm wondering, because it's a religious high school, I'm wondering if October 7th creates conversations about belief. You mentioned the Holocaust, which this is not the Holocaust.
Right.
I can't agree more. But that, of course, created doubts in God's existence and the veracity of Jewish life and belief and religiosity. I'm guessing October 7th probably has done that. People who have lost friends, family, students who look and see brothers, siblings, etc. Some of the soldiers who have fallen, their siblings are still in the school. Are those more conversations that you're having with students today about those issues of belief?
So for the past 25 years, I made it my business to teach the book of Job in 12th grade. Not in 9th grade, but in 12th grade. And the book of Job is very important because it's sort of all structure that we knew from the Tanakh. It all breaks down. We're used to an orderly God who runs his world in judgment and all of a sudden it doesn't work. It doesn't work for Job. And it's really fascinating because Job's friends sort of were very good students in school, and they knew that God punishes the evil, and they tell him you must have done something wrong. And that's why you're being punished, and repent and repent and repent. And Job says, but I didn't do anything wrong. And at the end, God commands his friends to bring a sacrifice of repentance because they said, you weren't truthful as Job was. And the reason I teach this in 12th grade is because I think, at least in the world we live in, there's so many confusing moments. There's so many things we don't understand. And in that sense, I think Himmelfarb is sort of somewhat different in the...
Because it's also a school that pushes kids to ask questions, right? To be quizzical, to ask the tough issue, bring up the tough issues.
Right. And even more than that, as educators, as rabbis, we tell them sometimes we don't have the answers. I was lucky. I was a student of Rav Amital, who was a survivor. And once I asked him how he continued his faith, his belief, after his family was murdered. He came here alone. And he said sometimes the other alternative is even worse. That means I was waiting for a different answer. I wanted him to say to me, oh, everything's okay. We came and we built a country and we have a yeshiva and God's on our side. But he didn't say that to me. And it took me years to understand what he was saying. He said, no, I made a choice. Faith is sometimes an act of choice. It isn't always obvious. For some people, it might always be obvious. And, I spend a lot of time talking to bereaved parents, and I never give them explanations. I don't think they're interested in explanations. The thing about life is having the strength to find some kind of meaning after these terrible tragedies. And in a way, I went back to read Man in Search of Meaning of Viktor Frankl. I read him 30 years ago, and during the war, I read him again. And I think the story is really a story of meaning. People have to find meaning in their lives. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's chaotic. But the big thing is to find a life full of meaning. And in a way, I think we have a lot of it here in Israel.
The Israeli experience, the story, the survival of continuing to build the state.
Right. And it's not only survival, it's a very interesting, dynamic, complicated country. But at least we're part of it. At least we live it. At least we breathe it. At least it's a form of redemption. I don't think there's any nation who came back to its land after 2,000 years. The Irish and the Italians who moved to the United States became Americans.
Right.
They don't want to go back. And it's quite a story.
You know what I tell people all the time when people ask me, I've been here now 30 something years. People say, what's the difference between living in America, living here? And I feel that no matter what anyone does in this country, obviously someone could say something else, but I think no matter what we do, from plumber to lawyer to doctor to journalist, whatever it is, you're still building the country. And that gives a sense of purpose and mashma'ut and importance in your life, which is something that I don't know that you get anywhere else. But Rabbi Yirmi, I do want to, you mentioned the 27, you mentioned the 10 soldiers, students who fell over the last year, but tragedy also fell very close to you during this war. When your son-in-law, Yinon Fleischman, was killed, he was in a tank up north. The tank overturned, and he was killed. Your daughter, Noah's husband, the father of your grandson, young toddler. And it went from students to a son-in-law. And I did not know Yinon, but reading, I have the bumper sticker on my front door nowadays. But reading the stories about Yinon was really a yeshiva student, went on to pursue a doctorate, was someone who people said he's like the total antithesis almost of a soldier, right? A guy who would sit and learn and read but when called up to serve in Miluim and reserves, came and was there and was in his tank. So this is I can't imagine, but the sense of bereavement, it's got to be a different level.
And I think that one has to understand that there are different levels of sorrow, and I think it's always very hard for the parents, for the widows, for the orphans. Sometimes my wife wakes me up at 2 a.m. and she says, "I can't believe Yinon was killed. I can't believe that my daughter's a widow." And he was just such a lovely, intelligent person,
an educator like you as well.
And he was a wonderful teacher. And he combined different worlds. He was very learned in Jewish studies. He was a Talmid Chacham. He was a very good academic. But it's interesting, when I think about Yinon, he was an amazing listener. He had a lot to say about a lot of things, but he always listened. He would listen on the Shabbat table. He listened to Noah. He listened to Ziv. He listened to his students. He listened to the text. When he read a text, the people sometimes who come to a text and they decide what the text is going to say even before they read it. And he would listen to the text and say, what is this text telling me? And he didn't even think he was going to be called up because, he was such an intellectual. But he was a very good gunner, it turns out. And then, and he really didn't like the army. He was, he really was a man of peace. But finally he opened his phone at like 2 p.m. and he was called up, and Noah moved in with Ziv, and our other son-in-law was called up, and our son Noam was called up. And when they arrived in the north, there was a lot of shooting in the north. Actually, they didn't have enough tanks, and some people could go home. And he called Noah and he said, "What should I do? Should I come or should I stay?" And she said, "I can't answer. That's your decision." And then he said, "This is a milchemet mitzvah. This is a war in which it's clear that, there's no black and white here. the Hezbollah and the Hamas want to destroy us. And even though he hated army, he hated the art of killing, he said, I'm going to stay because that's my responsibility. So that's a very hard blow. But I think Noah did she did something very smart, and I didn't understand it at the time. She was at our house. The army notified her that Yinon was killed in our home, the home she lived in before she got married. And a couple of months after Yinon was killed, she said, Abba, I'm going to go back to teach. She's a teacher. She teaches now 11th grade. And I thought it was a little too early, but that was her decision. And she came into the classroom and she said, okay, girls, you just be regular. I'll be regular. You don't have to give me psychological help. I get it. Other places. Okay, we're going to start. And in a way, she brought Yinon back to the class also. And he loved chocolate, so the girls made this huge chocolate wall. They with all the different kinds of chocolates Yinon loved. And when I was very young, my father said to me, if you want to be happy, Freud says you need two things. You need love and you need work. And then when I was in Yeshivat Har Etzion, Rav Lichtenstein was talking about something, and he said, and Freud said that if you want to be happy, you need two things. You need love and you need work. And what my father said was the same as Rav Lichtenstein. I said, okay, this is very important. And Noah was able to go back to work, work that she loves. And then we were talking and she said, maybe it's a little bit easier for me because we really had a good marriage. And then she looked at me and she said, but Abba was too short. This thing about love is an important thing. And I think it really sustains you. And in a way, I understand that the dead are dead and that we've buried them and that they've gone on. But when it creates these relationships in life, especially relationships which have to do with love and giving, and they stay with you. They're really there. They don't go anywhere. It doesn't mean that you can't go on with life, but it's so I have all these kids in my head all the time. And we converse in this strange way. I have Yinon in my head all the time. So the dead are dead, but they're there, and in a way they sustain you.
I'm going to take a sharp turn, and I'm going to bring it to real life, or to real politics for a moment. Mm-hmm. This is real life, mm-hmm. But to the politics, the fake life. Mm-hmm. You spoke at the Knesset recently, and you spoke about, your own sons who have been serving, some in Miluim and some in their compulsory service. You've appeared before the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, which is the one that is leading the debate right now on the draft law, the IDF draft law, and the potential continued attempt to pass a law to give a p'tor, an exemption, to the ultra-Orthodox, to the Haredim. It boils the blood, to say the least, definitely by me, and I know many other people, and especially from the community that you come from, that you are one of the leaders of the national religious community, which teaches the Torah, teaches a life of observance, but a life of service. This is the complete opposite of that. And it was a very passionate speech that you gave there in the Knesset. And How do you see this changing, if at all? I mean, you're telling us stories of people, lists of names of people who embodied the life of devotion to Judaism, to the Torah, and a life of devotion to service. They can go together.
How will it change? I don't know. I'm not a politician. I don't know the dynamics of politics. But when religion is corrupted, we're entering a disaster zone. Religious people, if they want to define themselves as religious, have to be kinder, have to be more giving of themselves, have to be part of public service. I think the ultra-Orthodox world was sort of a reaction to the Holocaust. There was a feeling that everything was gone, and they had to build these very strong communities. I think it also has to do a lot with fears, which I completely understand, about being modern, and I guess what religious people, and I included, would talk about excessive freedom, loss of structure, loss of historical framework, breakup of a family structure. So I can understand them, and I think there are a lot of very decent people in the ultra-Orthodox community. But this is very shameful, what is happening here. Will it change or not? I don't know. But after I spoke up in the Knesset, I walk in the street and women come over to me and they say, my husband's serving another 100 days in Gaza. We have 4 children. Thank you for saying what you said. The day after I spoke, I got a WhatsApp from a Himmelfarb boy who's in Gaza and said, thank you for speaking up. I mean, we have the same problem here as we have the same problem in the United States, is that this divisive politics is destroying the fabrics of all decent democratic communities. This cannot go on. It cannot go on in the United States. It cannot go on here. This ultimately the very delicate fabric of life will disintegrate. Democrats and Republicans cannot be enemies. They both have to serve the United States. And
here we have, we're talking as this Ronen Bar Bibi Netanyahu fight continues to go on at the court and in the public sphere and in the media. And it's, tell me who you vote for, and I could tell you where you basically stand on that issue. I mean, the politics here have become disgusting, polarizing in ways that are unimaginable.
And I always imagine the man in the tank who's in Gaza or in the north, and he's saying, but I'm putting my life on the line, and you guys can't get along. I mean, some of these issues can really be solved if they want to be solved. So many of these fights are just useless. They lead nowhere. And I think it's not only a question of one side. It's usually 2 sides. But I think that a lot of people can pay the price of the war, but they can't pay the price of the internal discord. The internal discord sort of brings this terrible gray cloud over our whole lives, and And I think sometimes politicians, they play this game and they don't understand that the cord can snap. The prices people have paid here are so heavy.
I mean, it's heavy, and people are being asked to pay even more. You and I share nephews, 3 of them triplets. One is a officer in Tzanchanim and paratroopers. One is an officer in Golani. One is now in the additional part of the service that they've added on in Egos, 3 combat soldiers who are being asked to give even more. The Haredim are not doing what they can do, but also the as you said, the man in the tank, or those 3 who are out there fighting, training the next generation of soldiers. How are they supposed to continue when they see that this is what's happening in society? I mean, I'm like, how do you tell the students in 12th grade who are just a few months from graduating and either going into the army or spending a gap year in a mechina or yeshiva or whatever it is? But as we know at Himmelfarb, 99% or whatever it is, in enlistment into the IDF. How do you tell them, yes, go, but I know that, in the Knesset, they don't care about you necessarily.
I don't know if they don't care. I mean, but sometimes you get that feeling that they don't care. They don't understand. What we tell them is, this is going to be your country and you're going to make it better. Now, it might be naive. We might be naive. The people who built this country are naive. The people who serve are naive. But we tell them, you're going to change things, and you're going to find middle ground. And it's not only an Israel problem. It's a technology problem. Everybody's constantly hearing his own opinions. People don't meet. People don't talk. People don't discuss. What America used to be for me was, you try to find the middle ground. So it seems that the world is in this turbulence, and there are not enough responsible people out there. And maybe the responsible people don't have the gumption to go into politics. There are a lot of capable people in this country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, politics have become so nasty, that nice, decent, intelligent human beings
don't want to do it.
No,
but on the issue of service,
yeah,
I said once to a good friend who was called up, I don't know, for the 5th time,
yeah.
over this war, and I said, you know what the problem is? It's you, that you keep going. If you were not to go, not just you, but you and everyone else were to stop showing up and stop serving, then the government would have no choice but to draft the Haredim, would have no choice but to say, okay, what is the purpose of this war? Would have no choice but to give real answers to the issues that we're dealing with as a nation. But because, I don't know if it's naive, but it's that service, that sense of devotion, it keeps going, right? Of course, I don't want people not to serve. Of course, we have to keep giving, but it doesn't. I don't know where it stops ever.
First of all, you're asking a much better question than I have an answer to. I think people serve because they understand that the consequences of the vicious attack on October 7th, where this will end, and if we're able to build a strong center, civil society, which creates different kinds of politics, I don't know. I think there's so many things up in the air. I think we're in this very big story, and the story's not over, and the war's not over, and so many things are changing in the world. My mother, who fled the Nazis, but she moved here with my father in 1970, and we grew up here. But she was used to a sort of a normal Western post-World War II world, and we have these conversations now because she feels that things are unraveling. And I told her we were just lucky to live the vast part of our life in this abnormally stable post-World War II liberal democracy. I hope there'll be enough sensible people who will try to keep things together. But I don't even want to think about the consequences if not.
No, I want to hope as well, and I do totally. It's a question also of great leadership that I think we're lacking here. I want to let you go, Rabbi Yirmi, but I do have to ask you. Yom HaZikaron, which we've spoken a lot about, service, which we've spoken a lot about, but we transition very quickly. The founding fathers of this country did something crazy, but maybe also brilliant in connecting Yom HaZikaron with Yom HaAtzmaut and reminding us on Independence Day what is that price that those who have paid in that very holy twilight between the 2 days where the days merge together has to give you pause. It gives everyone pause. But can you give us, out of the deep grief and pain, the personal pain, the national pain, the pain of losing your students, what is the hope?
This is a fascinating country. We naturally tend to focus on the deficiencies and on the terrible politics. And this country has done something amazing since it was founded in 1948. There's so many wonderful people, different kinds of Jews, different kinds of Israelis, and then you have these stories of those Bedouins who came in and tried to save people on October 7th. So it's I really believe in the Jewish people in that sense. I believe in the Israeli people. I believe that there are a lot of very good, intelligent people who want things to be good for everyone. And I'm very grateful. My great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, he was murdered in Auschwitz. And I can bring Israeli boys to say Kaddish in Auschwitz. If he would have known that before he was killed, he was a great man, that his great-grandson would be coming to say Kaddish, that would have meant everything to him. So you always have to look at reality as it is, but you always have to try to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture of what it is to live in the Jewish state is something which I can be very grateful for and makes me very happy. And I've also learned that you can be happy and sad at the same time. They don't contradict each other. So I can't separate the 2 days. I'm still very sad on Yom HaAtzmaut, but we'll try to celebrate to the best that we can.
Okay. Rabbi Yirmi Stavitsky, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Yaakov Katz.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. As always, you can find us where podcasts can be found on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and the website of Times of Israel. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast. In the meantime, Yom HaAtzmaut Sameach, happy